Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, April 13th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 142 days. The game against Michigan in 228 days. The Ohio State football team headed into the home stretch of the spring season this week. Spring game is Saturday, of course, and yesterday we got to watch practice for the third time this spring. There was a lot to talk about following that open viewing window. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman was there with me on Monday morning. So he joins me now. Tony, let's start with the offensive line. You never want to read too much into any one practice that we get to see, but there was a new center repping with the first team when we were watching on Monday. Tell everyone about that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Luke Whippler there instead of Matt Jones. Wasn't too long ago, maybe a show or so ago, when we talked about how it seemed like the set five was already in place and Luke Whippler would be 6 or 7 somewhere in there, but it looked like, and it didn't look like, he was definitely there with the ones at center, and Matt Jones was with the 2s. And so, yeah, you don't want to read too much into it, but you have to read something into it. And it also goes in line with some of the videos we've seen produced by Ohio State and tweeted out where he's definitely in there. And I don't recall seeing Matt Jones take any second team or first team reps at center. I didn't see all of them. Obviously, we weren't there for the entire thing, but while I was there, it was usually Luke Whippler.
Now, you got to remember, we were only there through period 6 of practice, but yes, you are correct. It was just Matt Jones with the 2s and Luke Whippler with the 1s during the periods we got to see. I think they do 15 or 18 periods of practice, so that does not mean that was all practice, but during the period we got to see, it was just Luke Whippler. Another interesting note on practice, and during the window we got to watch, was at wide receiver. I think everyone has a pretty good sense for who the top 2 guys there are. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. But there was a different third guy out there with them. It was not Jameson Williams. It was someone who listeners to Buckeye Weekly may have heard us talking up in probably in an irresponsible manner about a year ago. But now he does seem to be making a move towards that first team. Tony, let people know who that is.
Yeah, Jackson Smith-Njigba was in there. I believe it was in the slot, but who knows? They move him all around, and so he can play X, he can play Z, he can play H, whatever they need. But yeah, he was with Olave when Olave was out there, and Garrett Wilson with the 1s. And I asked Ryan Day about him afterwards, and basically, because we've talked about him in the same fashion as Garrett Wilson the year before. And Garrett Wilson followed the Chris Olave. You come on late as a freshman, you blossom as a sophomore. And so I asked him, is he in that same line right now? Is that the way things are going? And he didn't necessarily say, yes, Tony, it sure is. But he did say they wanted to see him with the 1s and they want to get him more involved. And, just needs to continue to get stronger in practice. But they like the trajectory. They like the way things are going. They like the way he's playing. And I don't think there's enough passes you could throw that guy. I think he's special. To me, he's a combination of Olave and Garrett Wilson, and that he can do anything on the outside. He can do the slot stuff. We saw him in the back of the end zone last year. I mean, he's got great spatial awareness, football awareness, and just get him involved and things will happen. And so, it was good to see that. I think seeing Jameson Williams with the 2s, I mean, that tells you, and we'll talk about somebody else with the 2s, but I think we're seeing they want to involve more guys, and it's not just going to be Olave and Wilson. And so it's going to be a deep group, but it's certainly, again, you don't want to read too much into it, but you better read something into the fact that he's with the 1s.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean that that's absolutely what's going to be the lineup for the first game against Minnesota, but it means they're at least thinking about it. It's at least in the conversation right now. So there have only been 3 guys so far this spring to get their black stripes removed: Jack Sawyer, Travion Henderson, Marvin Harrison Jr. And, maybe this was a little bit of confirmation bias on my part because I was kind of looking to see how he did. But while we were watching practice, it sure felt like we heard Marvin Harrison's name a lot as they were announcing who was making plays during, red zone drills and other drills.
I heard Marvin Harrison touchdown at least 4 times today. And now, remember, there's no defensive line, and so it's basically just 7-on-7 type of stuff. And if you can just get off of your man, then you got a pretty good shot. But, yeah, he's just productive, and he's advanced. Ryan Day talked about him as well on Monday. And I think we talked about him last week, how he was maybe underrated. And I think everybody's seeing that. And he is a guy who's worked his way into the lineup. And uh, I think his presence with the twos, I'm guessing an X, frees up Jamison Williams to get off of that X that he played last year and maybe be more of his true self. And maybe we'll see more of that this year with those two. And just a big red zone weapon and a guy who can be effective at the chains, moving the ball. And I'm interested to see again, how much can they get these guys involved and how much are they willing to remove the top two guys from the field in terms of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and play these other guys who are also talented and would be playing anywhere else.
Yeah, and I mean, if they do move Jamison Williams off that X spot and move him maybe to Z, which is where I think I would have expected him to be when he first came in, one of the plays we saw was Jack Miller heaving just an absolute bomb down the field. I mean, he must have thrown it 60 yards in the air, and Jamison Williams was down there to catch it. So that, he was working with the twos, but he looked pretty good working with the twos. So definitely don't, expect to see him to continue being in that wide receiver rotation, whether he's a starter or not. In addition to Marvin Harrison, one of the other guys who is a true freshman who has already lost his black stripe, I mentioned him earlier, Travion Henderson. He just looks so smooth out there. Everything he does just looks very smooth, very natural. And, as you said, you can't read too much into individual drills and 7-on-7. We did not watch a full practice. And yeah, it's very easy to look really good running when there's no defensive line there and the line is blocking air, but he certainly didn't look out of place out there. And, I think we had talked about him as maybe he can win that starting job towards the end of the year. I might be kind of mentally moving that timetable up a little bit that, he may be in that conversation for at least extremely regular carries earlier than that.
I wrote something similar on Sunday saying I've kind of had to recalibrate that November timeline because he didn't play football last year. He didn't have a senior season of football. And so you assume he's going to be behind everybody. And of course, he said when we talked to him this spring, I just need to get hit once with the pads on and I'll be good. And he wasn't lying. I mean, he is smooth. His runs almost seem like a really well choreographed fight scene where every movement is perfect. And it's like, yeah, that looks a little too good. But it's like just the feel that he has running the ball. I was watching him catching there, throwing passes to the running backs today, watching some wheel routes, some swing passes. It's all very easy to him. But of course, he was a receiver early in his career. He was a defensive back early in his career in high school. So he's accustomed to doing that as well. I think as coach told me back in February, like Syracuse and Tennessee offered him as a wide receiver during his sophomore season or so. And so he's just a natural athlete with really great feel. And one of these guys that I hope he gets an opportunity to run the ball on Saturday and show people with some semblance of an offensive line. And the thing is, there probably won't be any tackling, but it would just, because the running game is, with the spring game, it just doesn't really almost exist. It's just throwing the ball and two-hand touch. But it would be nice to see him do something, let the fans experience him. But I think they won't have to wait long once that Minnesota game starts to see something from him. That's where I'm at right now. You too.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. But yeah, I would also caution people, don't go into the spring game on Saturday expecting to see Travion Henderson run for 150 yards. Like, that is just not how spring games work. And Ryan Day said on Monday that they're not totally sure what they're going to do, but they think they might not tackle, or, they might just kind of thud, stick and wrap, and that's it. And so, if you're doing that, it's just, it's like when we were trying to watch Tate Martell in the open field when he had a black jersey on. It's like, okay, well, how much can he run? How much can he get loose? And it's like, well, if anyone, if they're going to blow it dead anytime anyone gets within 2 yards of him, like, well, it's kind of hard to see how elusive and explosive he might be in the open field. So same thing with Travion Henderson. It's never a running backs game in the spring game. So don't go in with unrealistic expectations. But, we saw them running some passing drills, and you run him out on a wheel route, and it's like, yeah, I could see some things happening there. So something to keep an eye on. When we talked to Ryan Day late Monday morning, in addition to all that stuff, he also said they are still kind of rolling quarterbacks through. There's no set number one guy right now, but once again, this is the third practice we've gotten to see, And all three times it has been CJ Stroud with the ones, then Jack Miller, and then Kyle McCord in that order. So, I mean, I know, yes, they have to say it's still an open position. And I do believe that they don't know who's going to start for sure in that first game, but it sure seems like, yeah, it's an open competition, but also they kind of know what order guys are running in right now.
Well, and when the coaches yell ones, it's CJ Stroud that runs onto the field, so there is something to that. But every time I've seen him, I don't see any like real distancing. Although I think the most interesting thing that we saw that maybe exhibited some distancing was during the hurry up portion when it was CJ Stroud running some hurry up offense against no defense, and it was Jack Miller. And Jack Miller is having issues either calling the play or getting it in properly, getting it in effectively enough, and telling the offensive line who was there in a little sugar huddle with them. And so like Day had to blow the whistle like 3 or 4 times to get them situated, have Jack Miller get everybody on the correct page. And I wonder if that was nothing or if that's something that has been an issue. But when you see him throw the ball, Jack Miller, CJ Stroud, I don't see any real, like, there's no one guy is different. I'm always impressed by what Jack Miller does. And I think this is coming from, I wonder how much of this is coming from a position where maybe we didn't have the highest expectations for him. And then you actually get to see him and you're like, well, he looks like he can play at Ohio State to me. And of course, CJ Stroud, same thing. And then you throw Kyle McCord. I'm always impressed when I watch Kyle McCord. He's throwing to, one of his third team receivers on Monday was Julian Fleming. So even though, like he's throwing to guys down the depth chart, he's still throwing to some talented guys. And Emeka Egbuka, I think maybe was with the twos in the slot. I can't remember, but it's just, I'm always like, he had a pretty bad interception at the end of practice that we saw to Reed Carrico, just right over the middle to, just a bad interception. I think trying to dump it off, but when he like unloads it, I mean, it's on time. It looks good. And so it's fun to watch all of those guys. I think there will be impressive moments for all of those guys. But as Ryan Day said on Monday, just when one guy starts to look like he's taking some sort of a step, the guy takes a step back, and then somebody else takes a step forward. And it's not necessarily 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or maybe it is. So this is definitely a process. But I'm always impressed by all of these guys. I haven't seen anybody be like, ugh,
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching Justin Fields when he got there in the spring of 2019 and watching him throw compared to all the other guys. And it was just, you could just tell from across, diagonally across the facility, his ball just came out different than everyone else's ball. There was a different arc on his 30-yard throws than everyone else's. It looked different. And this year, there isn't that separation. They all looked solid. And, the first time I got to watch practice this spring, I came away thinking like Kyle McCord, like in the red zone drill, Kyle McCord was like, all right, like that looked like that was impressive. He was throwing some ropes. And then, and then he had, as you mentioned, an interception during practice today or on Monday. But, you've had, as Ryan Day said, like you're doing a little bit of this guy looks good. Okay, now this guy looks good. And the other guy has taken a step back. That just sort of seems like, yes, that's young quarterbacks. Turns out they're not all perfect immediately. Crazy. Unreal. I mean, is that too much to ask? Apparently, I don't know. On the defensive side of the ball, one of the most encouraging signs for the defensive backfield was 2 guys who weren't actually out on the field, but who you noticed were up and working after suffering some pretty serious injuries, who the defense is probably going to be relying on at some point this fall. Let people know who those folks were.
Yeah, redshirt freshman Court Williams, safety, and then, of course, redshirt junior Cam Brown, the cornerback. Both were running fast in the warm-ups. And it's just warm-ups where they're running up and down the field, but they were running full bore. And, Cam Brown, I actually saw him racing one of his teammates. And so that gives you Cam Brown coming back from the Achilles. Yeah. And then, of course, Court Williams, the ACL. And both guys looked, I didn't see any braces on anybody or anything like that. But, of course, they're just doing light stuff, nothing physical, but still just good to see those guys running around. And that's what Ryan Day said at the beginning of spring. Like everybody would be able to do something. All of the hurt guys would be able to do something. Harry Miller was dressed and out there, like not out practicing, but he was He didn't have. I don't believe he had any knee braces on, which is indicative of he's not practicing as an offensive lineman. Kirk Barton told me to look for that. Like he called me on Monday and we were talking about it. He's like, yeah, once I saw there's no braces, I knew, that's just something to look for the offensive lineman. If there are no braces, they're not practicing. And so there's a little tip from your Uncle Larry. But yeah, I've kind of lost my train of thought because that's what Kirk Barton does to people. But you just having Cam Brown and Court Williams out there running around, it's the beginning of, it's a continuation of what has been a long process for them, and they need Cam Brown really, really bad this year. And so I know Kerry Combs and Matt Barnes are probably dying just to get him like healthy, and so they can get him reps and all of that. But I think the good thing is they're there, they're doing their mental reps, they're watching, they're learning. And then once the preseason begins, then we'll see what they can do. But just good to see them out there running normally.
Yeah, those guys are two people who I think are going to be getting significant reps this fall. And, even if they're not repping right now, if they're at least out there, that's a good first step in the recovery process. And then, get closer to being able to cut, being able to twist, being able to do all the things you need to do as a defensive back before you're playing games for real. So they will not be out there for this Saturday, but if they're out there for the Minnesota game, that is probably very good news for the Buckeyes. Just a little housekeeping note. This is acting as something of a de facto Buckeye Weekly episode, our Monday practice instant reaction podcast, because we are pushing our 2 episodes of Buckeye Weekly back this week. You'll have those on Wednesday and Thursday instead of Tuesday and Thursday. That will allow us to also include what we learned from talking to players and coaches later this week as we head into that spring game. And then, of course, we will both be at the Horseshoe this Saturday for the spring game. We don't know all the details yet on what we can and can't do, but we should have a live pregame show of some sort. There should be an instant reaction show afterwards as well. Yes, it's the spring game. Yes, it's just practice, but 30,000 people or 20,000 people, whatever it is, are going to be there on Saturday. So we're going to treat it like a game, just like a normal game as well. So we'll get our reps in and start getting ready for the season. So you can have that to look forward to later on this week. And this is going to be a fantastic week at BuckeyeScoop.com. There is a ton going on right now. Mark Givler and Mick Walker just had turned a bunch of really, really interesting reports from the Under Armour camp. Talked to Mark yesterday on the Morning Scoop about that a little bit, but they've had a ton of interesting reporting on that. I've had another round of fascinating inside practice updates, stuff I wish I had read before I was at practice, and I could have been looking for certain stuff because sometimes he finds out stuff that we don't even see when we're at practice. So get to see some of his stuff had already checked out from what we had seen, and other stuff was like, I wish I had known that before I went. So you can know all that stuff too if you're a member of BuckeyeScoop.com. You can sign up right there. Your first month is the price of a lousy chain store pizza. So instead of buying a lousy chain store pizza or a couple of cups of expensive drive-through coffee, why don't you treat yourself to a month of BuckeyeScoop.com instead? We're heading into a very, very interesting off season and starting to ramp up towards the start of the actual college football season. And BuckeyeScoop.com is a wonderful place to do all of that. Make sure you also check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, all those places. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of those. You can subscribe right there, leave us a 5-star rating or review. And also, you can check out youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Tony put up a bunch of really great videos from practice, inside practice on Monday. You can find that all there. Our interview with Ryan Day was up there. We'll again have interviews with more players and coaches later on this week as we head into the spring game. And then, of course, all of our great podcasts, all the camp coverage from Mark and Mick. It's all there at youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Just subscribe right there, and you'll get notified every time we drop a new video. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.